Welcome back to Harbaugh. Just 4 months until November's midterm elections. They're coming up quick, and the mood is grim for many Democrats. The tide of President Obama's victory in 2008 lifted a lot of smaller boats with him, but now it looks like stormy waters ahead. Look at our latest NBC News Wall Street Journal poll. These numbers tell you quite a bit. A year ago, President Obama's approval rating among white voters who will vote in this heavily, these midterms are always older and whiter, if you will, was at 49%. Disapproval among white voters, 40%. Today, approval among white voters down to about a third, 36%. Disapproval up to well past half, 56% among, again, white voters. Should Democrats be afraid, and does a no-growth economy make things that much worse? Well, the Washington Post, Chris Cillizza is an expert. He's managing editor of postpolitics.com. And Newsweek's Jonathan Alder's got a great book out called The Promise. A hell of a book, and everybody's talking about it. It's causing a lot of trouble for Obama because he and Joe Biden seem to have different views about the outcome in Afghanistan. That said, let's talk about unemployment in this situation. Look at these disapproval numbers among whites. Now, Chris, just so our people at home understand why we're doing this, why are we singling out white voters as opposed to minority voters, and why is it significant?
All right, well, first of all, Chris, white voters always make up a large majority of the electorate, but small differences matter, especially in low turnout midterms. In 2008, white voters made up 74% of all voters. In 2006, the last midterm before that, 79%. So white voters make up a bigger proportion of the electorate in midterms traditionally. If you move that out, you're talking about 3 million more white voters if it's like 2006 than if it's like 2008. With President Obama's numbers, like you just showed, like that with white voters, in a lot of these rural Midwestern districts, it's going to be a harder sell unless his numbers can bump up a little bit there. He's not going to win them. He came closer to winning white voters than John Kerry did, than Al Gore did. All that said, he needs to be above that 39% that you just cited.
John, we have a lot of viewers out there that got out and came out of nowhere to vote for Obama last time. They may not always vote. Younger voters, white voters, minority voters may not always vote, but they got out for this guy we're looking at right now. They wanted him to be president of the United States. He is president of the United States. These are troubled waters in terms of the economy. Will they get out to vote this November to offset this advantage among white, older voters?
You know, we don't know the answer to that, but if they just go back to the 2006 totals, those were very good for Democrats. That was a very, very good year for Democrats. So they can have the same percentage of the white vote turning out and do fine, but they've got to get these independent voters. I see it less as a racial white minority thing than independents versus Democrats. Obama will do fine with hardcore Democrats. The Democratic Party will do fine in these midterms. Of course, Obama's not on the ballot himself. With hardcore Democrats, it's the independents that they're losing. He's got to get them back. He's got to get into the game of stigmatizing the Republicans. You know, I remember from the Roosevelt years, from studying them, Roosevelt with delight would talk about Martin, Barton, and Fish. You know, he'd really go right after the Republicans. Well, you've got a Barton there right now, and Obama's starting to go after him. But, you know, why not?
Barton's
the
guy he's the biggest BP defender. But let me get back to Chris.
Boehner and BP, you know, just go right at him.
Well, here's the question about whether you can do a blame game right now, Chris Cillizza, and that's the question. Will the country listen to Barack Obama if he starts beating up one? I agree. I think the Republican leadership is pretty hard to defend. Mitch McConnell says vote no, obstruct, obstruct, obstruct. John Kyle's just a wild, hawkish maniac sometimes politically. You've got Eric Cantor, who's a young Richard Nixon, basically, and you've got Boehner, who looks like a golf guy that just blew a putt. They're not exactly the most exciting, positive group of people, but yet they're not running for office this time. The people are voting negative on a bad unemployment situation, Chris. They don't like the high unemployment, so they'll vote for the out party. Is there anything Barack can do about that, the president?
Well, he can hope that, look, the unemployment rate is not going to drop significantly. It may drop some. It's not going to drop to 5%, Chris. You and I know this, and I certainly don't have a degree in economics, but everybody I know who does says it's unlikely. So what he has to show is movement in a semi-positive direction. Can he show that? The other thing is, your point,
can
Chris,
he get it down
is it a referendum? Is it a referendum or is it a choice? The White House thinks it's a choice. People don't like Republicans. That's different than 1994. Remember, Republicans had been out of office for 40 years, the public was more willing to give them a chance. They were just fired twice in a row, 2006 and 2008.
Right.
They have bad numbers. So is it a choice, or is it simply, you know what, Democrats control everything, we want a little bit of balance, let's put Republicans in and see what they can do? We don't know the answer to it.
They have to.
John, I like it offering the voters a choice.
Yeah.
Do you like the R's, you like the D's. But you know when you walk into a voting booth, you basically vote this sort of impulsive yes or no. I like the way things are going, I'm going to vote for the party in power. I don't like the way things are going, I'm going to vote for the party out of power. You only get that one vote, yes or no. It's very hard to vote no, you don't like the way things are going, and still vote for a Democrat this time, isn't it? Isn't that the hardest thing in the world?
No, you can vote no on a return to the past. And Obama's talked about this in some
speeches. That's not the way people vote.
Well,
they vote on the president.
Not just the president. No, you can nationalize an election in a lot of different ways. The idea that some Democrats have that they should give up on nationalizing this is ridiculous. Of course you want to go for the local angles where you can to keep your guys in power.
Okay,
but
when's the last time a party's been able to run against the party that's not in power?
Look, it's very, very hard.
434.
Only twice, 34, and 2002 are the only times in 100 years where the party controlling the White House has won the first midterm elections. So they're not going to gain seats. It's a question of limiting the losses. And to educate the country that if the Republicans take control, this guy Joe Barton becomes head of all energy policy from the Congress. This is a guy who wants to apologize to BP, and he's going to be running our energy policy.
Okay, let's try this question.
Do people know who Joe Barton is?
You have to explain it. You have to educate. That's up to the president.
Let me run this by you, Chris. So listen, you're an absolutely objective reporter. You have no opinions on anything. I know this is true. You are completely clean of any opinion or beliefs. Okay, now here's the question. Can Barack Obama, between now and late October, before the elections, November 2nd, can he run pictures of top Republicans like Barton and Boehner and those guys and say, vote against this crowd? They are a bunch of burgers, business, rich guys. They're all with corporate interests. They're not the kind of people that look out for regular people. Can they make them the bad guys and win this, at least cut their losses, as John says? Can they do it? It's never been done. Can they do it?
I'm skeptical of it, Chris, for one basic reason. Most people have no idea in this country who Joe Barton and John Boehner are. Can you argue that they are indicative of sort of this is what the Republican Party will do? Yes, and I think the DNC and individual candidates will make that case. But remember, Republicans tried to make elections about Nancy Pelosi for a very long time, and not enough people knew who she was for it to work.
But Chris, this is about the president acting as party leader, which he has been reluctant to do. If he really wants to go out there and turn Joe Barton into a household name, he started to do it in his radio.
You're right.
He started to do it in his radio address last week, and he does it 5 more times in 5 more radio addresses.
Well,
gets out there and makes quips about him. Everybody will know who he is.
Just blue skyiness. Maybe he has to do what Oberman does every night. Worst person in the world. Go after the top 4 Republicans. Just blast them away. Say these are the guys. It may be a worse.
That's what Harry Truman did.
He did in what? In
48, run against the Congress, run against these Republicans in the Congress. They're extreme enough, Chris. They're out of the mainstream enough that it is possible and worth a try for the Democrats.
It's hard to do when you control both houses, though. And the Supreme Court. Well, you don't control the Supreme Court. Anyway, thank you. Thank you, Chris Cillizza. I hear one argument here, which is to run against Republicans. And your argument, Chris, is just take your lumps, right?
I just think John's right. It's an issue of limiting loss. DNC, Democrats, the White House are going to try to do it by recreating in some way that 2008 coalition, African-American voters, Hispanic voters, young voters. Okay. Anybody they get in there helps, but the electorate, the composition of the electorate, is going to make it tough. And history suggests they're headed for losses. Okay, thank you, Chris Cillizza. Thank you, Jonathan Rall. David, Jonathan's big book, The Promise. It's a huge book. Got to read it about Obama and what's going on right now. Up next, it's the end of the road for former Ohio Congressman Jim Traficant.